So when Jonah goes back and goes through the city of Nineveh reluctantly to announce that they're all going to be punished, and in a true sense, he hopes they will be. All of a sudden, in one day, and it's a big city, 120,000 people or something like that. So the first day he's walking through the town, everybody repents. And it really makes him mad. I think this is fascinating. He really is mad that they are not being punished and they're getting away with what they did. And it's God's compassion, His graciousness, His forgiveness, His love that enables them to be forgiven. And it really, really chaps Jonah. He just hates all that compassion business. So he's angry, he's furious, and he says to God, I have a right to be angry. I love that line in the Scriptures. I have a right to be angry. You're not doing what I think you should do. My life is not unfolding the way it should. The person I'm living with is not acting the way they should. Life is not the way it should. I have a right to be angry. Yeah, you have a right to be angry, but what does anger do? What does anger do for you? It creates a lot of energy. But if that energy is directed to destroying something or someone or some relationship, it can be very, very dangerous. And so the justification of anger is a risky thing. So God takes Jonah and gives him this experience. He places him in a place where he wants to rest. He tries to make a little cover for himself so he doesn't get bothered by the sun and the elements. And so God plants this little bush next to him, and it turns into this wonderful plant that produces oil, and it's covering him, it's keeping him warm and keeping the sun off of him, and then the plant is killed. The plant dies, and then he's sitting there, miserable because the sun is beating down on him, the wind is hot, and he can't stand it. And he really mourns the loss of this plant. And God looks at him and says, no, wait a minute. You're upset because you didn't want that plant to die. You wanted me to kill all those people back there in Nineveh. So don't you understand that to destroy is not my nature and it is not your nature? We're not made to destroy each other. That's not in our DNA. That's something that comes from a mind that is basically shifting back to its most primitive form, the reptilian brain. It's when we're frightened that whatever we have to have or need is being taken away from us, and we go into a self-survival mode. The heart is shut down, the higher levels of the brain are shut down, and we work almost on an animal instinct of destroying that which is causing us pain or running away from it. And that's exactly what the story is about, How do we change out of that terrible, vicious cycle of becoming frightened, overwhelmed by something not working for us? I watched in relationships, two people make a commitment to each other to be there for each other, to support each other, and then when they begin to feel that the other person isn't there for them, there's two reactions. They can either be filled with compassion, which is what God is filled with, which has everything to do with feeling someone else's pain. That's what compassion means. So if someone is making you angry because of the way they're acting, is it possible to imagine that there's something in them that they are caught in that is painful for them, and instead of dealing with that pain inside of them, they attack because they're afraid, they're frightened, they're in a place where they feel that something terrible is going to happen to them if they don't react in a violent way. And instead of looking into that person and feeling that pain with them, we say, wait a minute, you're now causing me pain, so that means I have to go into this self-survival mode. I have to attack you back. And the whole cycle just gets out of hand, and then there's nothing but blood all over the place. You attacking me attacking you, you doing something to me that makes me angry, and I'll then be angrier at you, and I'll do something that makes you angry. And we all know that cycle, It's not our nature to be angry. Our nature is to be connected, to nurture each other, to watch each other grow and flourish. That's the best part of who we are. So it means that we have to learn how to live in this world, be a part of this world, but not get caught up in the way in which justice and more primitive forms of our existence taught us. We have to evolve, we have to grow. That has something to do with repenting, growing, changing, becoming, in a sense, a higher being. Not that there's something wrong necessarily with the instinctive part of us. If you really get to the heart of it, it's not a negative instinct to want to survive, but it can be a negative instinct if survival means attacking that which is outside of us that is in pain, creating pain for us because it's in pain, or they're in pain. So then I look at this second reading, which is kind of an odd piece to fit into these two, and what I'm sensing in it is Paul, isn't always right. And the one thing about Paul in his writings, he lets you know that in the sense that in this particular passage in in Corinthians, what he's doing is he's saying to people, this is what God wants you to hear. I'm going to tell you what God feels. And then he goes into something, he'll say, well, but this is what I feel. This is my advice. And this is what he says before this passage before this passage appears in the New Testament reading of Corinthians. He says, this is my opinion. I think everybody, because the end of the world is coming, the world as we know it is ending. So what I think you should do is sort of not get engaged in anything in the world. So if you're engaged with anything that has to do with the way the world is going, if you're angry about something, if you're at odds with something, just let go of that, because if something's making you upset, just forget it, because it's not going to last much longer. If something's making you happy, don't think about that as the core of what you're looking forward to, because the things that even make you happy in this world, they're going to end. And so don't be engaged so much in the world of buying things and fixing things. Just stop being engaged. Well, that makes sense if the world as we know it is ending, literally stopping. And we know ultimately it will for all of us, in terms of the world that we live in here will change when we die. So there may be something about the end of life that we let go of things as we know we're about to die. I've seen that peace come over people where there's a release because they're no longer working or engaged in trying to deal with everything, and there's just a peaceful letting go. It's beautiful. But the key is not to be in the extreme of fighting and working against everything and wanting everybody that's not doing their work to be punished. The other image in this reading to me is you disconnect. You go inside. You don't deal with anything anymore. You shut down. Those are the two things that we do as human beings. That's the fight and flight. I'll yell and scream at you, or I'll shut down. It's a classic, dilemma. And so what I'd like to take from that is the tension that's in all of us in terms of how we deal with life. And we have in this incredible Messiah, this one who's calling you and me to let go of so many ways and patterns that we've been living in that keep us from the peace that is our inheritance. He just wants us to be able to understand what it's like to be filled with those qualities that God says that he is in that reading from Jonah. I am compassionate. I am filled with grace. Grace is unmerited love. I'm filled with that. That's who I am. I want everyone to live and to flourish. I don't want anyone to be punished. I know there are things in the Old Testament that look like God is trying to punish people, but what he's doing is threatening, which is about the only thing they understood. It's what you often do with young children. If you don't do this, or if you continue to do this, you're going to be punished. It has a certain power over people. It's the motivation from fear. It works, but it's not where anyone should stay. It's not where we need to remain. We need to go through that to the place where we see with the eyes of God. We understand with the heart of God. We feel the compassion that he feels, and we all of a sudden become an agent of grace and forgiveness, compassion to the world. It's an amazing change, And it might sound like, well, I'm swallowing hard and giving up all my needs and letting somebody else get away with a lot. And no, when you're compassionate, when you're filled with mercy, when you want someone to be transformed, there's a gift that comes back to you called peace that is beyond anything. It's called the peace of the kingdom. It's called the new life in the kingdom. It's called dropping and letting go of all these things that are just mechanical actions in this world and doing things that draw other people into life. That's what Jesus meant when he said, I'll make you fishers of men, not just collecting fish. So you can think that there's a way in which any work that we do in this world, any activity we do with our friends, our family, our loved ones, has the potential of either just getting things done, let's get this work done. It also has the potential, when it's done with this compassion and grace, to be an amazing, amazing source of life and goodness and beauty to each other.